Judge mocked black girl for defending her dad, until she used the law to turn the whole case around. Part 1. The weight of justice. Maya Johnson had always believed in the law. At 23 years old, she worked double shifts at Green's Diner on 5th Street, saving every dollar she could while studying paralegal courses online late into the night. Her small apartment smelled of coffee and old textbooks, but it was home. Her father, Robert Johnson, had raised her alone after her mother passed when Maya was just 7. He taught her to stand tall, speak truth, and never let anyone make her feel small. Robert worked as a maintenance supervisor at Riverside Manufacturing for 22 years. He was the kind of man who remembered everyone's birthday, who stayed late to fix broken equipment so the morning shift could start on time. But when the company merged with a larger corporation, things changed. New management came in, and suddenly Robert found himself written up for minor infractions he'd never committed. Then came the termination letter, citing insubordination and theft of company property, a toolbox he'd been given as a retirement gift years earlier. Maya knew her father. He would never steal, but proving it meant going up against Riverside's expensive legal team in a civil lawsuit Robert filed to clear his name and recover his pension. They couldn't afford a lawyer, so Robert represented himself with Maya's help. The preliminary hearing was set for mid-September at the county courthouse. Presiding judge, the Honorable Vincent Crawford. Judge Crawford had a reputation. 30 years on the bench, known for running a tight courtroom and having little patience for self-represented litigants. Maya had read about him, studied his past rulings, hoping to find some thread of fairness they could appeal to. As she and her father climbed the courthouse steps that Tuesday morning, Maya squeezed his hand. "We've got this, Dad. Truth always wins." Robert smiled, but his eyes held worry. "Baby girl, sometimes truth needs a louder voice than we've got." Maya didn't know yet how right he was. Part 2. The coldness of the bench. The courtroom felt enormous and hollow. Tall ceilings, dark wood paneling, and rows of empty benches that seemed to swallow sound. Maya sat beside her father at the plaintiff's table, her hands trembling slightly as she organized their documents, time cards, emails, witness statements from coworkers willing to vouch for Robert's character. Across the aisle, Riverside's attorney, a sharp-suited man named Gregory Walsh, sat with an assistant, barely glancing their way. When Judge Crawford entered, everyone rose. He was a tall man in his 60s, silver-haired and stern-faced, his black robes flowing behind him like a cape. He settled into his chair with practiced authority and immediately began reviewing the case file without greeting anyone. "This is CV-2-4-7-9. Johnson versus Riverside Manufacturing," he said flatly. "I see the plaintiff is pro se. Mr. Johnson, you understand you're representing yourself?" Robert stood. "Yes, Your Honor. My daughter Maya is assisting me." "She's studying. I didn't ask about your daughter." Judge Crawford's voice cut like glass. "Is she an attorney?" "No, sir, but then she has no standing in this courtroom beyond moral support." He turned to Walsh. "Counsel for the defense, your opening statement." Maya felt her chest tighten. Walsh stood smoothly, painting Robert as a disgruntled employee with a history of complaints, conveniently leaving out that those complaints were about safety violations Robert had reported. He made the toolbox sound like stolen property worth thousands, not a gift with Robert's name engraved on it. When it was Robert's turn, his voice shook. He wasn't used to public speaking, and the formal language tied his tongue. Judge Crawford interrupted him 3 times in 2 minutes, once for relevance, once for hearsay, once just to check his watch. Maya wanted to scream. She'd prepared notes, citations, everything Robert needed, but watching him stumble broke her heart. Finally, she stood. "Your Honor, may I sit down?" Crawford didn't even look at her. "Young lady, this isn't a high school debate. Your father chose to represent himself. Let him face the consequences. The dismissal in his tone wasn't just professional. It was personal, cold, and something else Maya couldn't quite name yet, but it felt like contempt. Part 3. Behind closed words. The hearing lasted only 40 minutes. Judge Crawford denied Robert's motion to admit key evidence emails for management pressuring him to falsify safety reports, calling it improperly authenticated. He sustained every objection Walsh made and overruled Robert's attempts to question the company's witness, the new operations manager who'd signed the termination paperwork, when Crawford finally dismissed them for a continuance in 30 days. Maya and her father left the courtroom in stunned silence. Outside, Robert leaned against the stone wall, suddenly looking every bit of his 58 years. "I should have just let it go," he said quietly. "Should have taken the loss and moved on." "No," Maya's voice was firm. "They lied about you, Dad. They're trying to take your pension, your reputation, everything you worked for. We're not giving up." But as they drove home in Robert's old pickup truck, doubt crept in. Maya had watched enough courtroom proceedings online to know what fair looked like, and this wasn't it. Crawford hadn't just been impatient, he'd been hostile. She couldn't stop replaying his tone when he dismissed her, that look in his eyes. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table with her laptop, searching through legal databases and public records. She started reading Judge Crawford's recent cases, looking for patterns. What she found made her blood run cold. Over the past 18 months, Crawford had presided over 12 civil cases involving corporate defendants. In 11 of them, he'd ruled in favor of the corporations. In 7, the plaintiffs were self-represented minorities, Black, Latino, immigrant workers. The dismissals followed similar patterns. Evidence excluded, testimonies cut short, motions denied without proper consideration. Then Maya found something else. A news article from 3 years ago, buried in the local business section. Judge Vincent Crawford's son-in-law had been appointed to the board of directors of Meridian Holdings, the parent company that had acquired Riverside Manufacturing. Maya's hand shook as she saved the article. This wasn't just unfair. This was corruption. And her father's case was caught right in the middle of it. Part 4. The line in the sand Maya brought her findings to her father the next morning before her shift at the diner. Robert sat at his kitchen table, reading the printed articles with growing disbelief. "You think he's ruling against me because of this connection?" Robert asked carefully, not wanting to believe a judge could be so corrupt. "I think he should have recused himself from your case the moment he saw Riverside's name," Maya said. "That's the law, Dad. Judges have to disclose conflicts of interest. He has a financial interest in seeing Riverside win." Robert rubbed his face. "Maybe. If we accuse a judge of being biased, we're going to make an enemy. We could lose everything." "We're already losing," Maya said softly. "He's not giving you a fair trial. He won't let me help you, won't admit your evidence, and he's treating you like you're wasting his time. This is our chance to fight back the right way with the truth." That evening, Maya called the one person she thought might help, her former civics teacher, Mrs. Patricia Henderson, who'd encouraged her interest in law and still practiced as a civil rights attorney. When Maya explained everything, Mrs. Henderson listened quietly. "Maya, what you're describing is serious," she said finally. "If you file a formal complaint or motion for recusal, you need ironclad evidence. And you need to be prepared for retaliation, not physical, but legal. Crawford could hold your father in contempt, dismiss the case, make things worse. So we just accept injustice?" Maya's voice cracked. "No, we document everything, build an unshakable case, and we bring it to someone who can't ignore it. Have you heard of the Judicial Ethics Committee?" Maya hadn't, but she learned quickly. Mrs. Henderson explained the process, how to file complaints, what evidence was needed, and most importantly, how to protect her father's case while building their challenge. She also agreed to review their documentation and help prepare a motion to recuse Crawford, though she couldn't formally represent them. "You're going to have to be brave, Maya," Mrs. Henderson said. "And your father will have to be braver. Because when you challenge power, power pushes back." Maya thought of her mother's words, passed down through her father. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing right even when you're terrified. "We'll be ready," Maya promised. Part 5. Building the Arsenal. The next 2 weeks became a blur of research, documentation, and preparation. Maya reduced her diner shifts to part-time, burning through her savings but knowing this fight mattered more than anything. She created a timeline of every interaction in court, noting Crawford's specific rulings, his tone, his dismissals. She cross-referenced them with his other recent cases, highlighting the patterns of bias. Mrs. Henderson connected her with a retired court stenographer named Diane Wu, who'd worked in Crawford's courtroom for years before leaving abruptly. When they met at a quiet coffee shop, Diane spoke carefully, choosing her words like someone who'd signed too many confidentiality agreements. "I can't give you specifics about other cases," Diane said. "But I can tell you that Judge Crawford has favorites. Defense attorneys he's friendly with, corporations that get preferential treatment. I've seen him exclude evidence for plaintiffs while letting defense slide with improper documents. When I raised concerns through proper channels, I was reassigned. Would you be willing to provide a written statement about the general pattern you observed?" Maya asked. Diane hesitated, then nodded. "If it's anonymous initially, yes. What he's doing isn't illegal in every instance. Judges have discretion, but the pattern is unmistakable. Someone needs to look closer." Maya also reached out to 2 other plaintiffs from Crawford's courtroom, a Latino construction worker who'd lost a wage theft case, and a black woman who'd been denied a discrimination hearing. Both had been self-represented. Both told similar stories of hostile treatment, excluded evidence, and rapid dismissals. Neither had known they could challenge a judge's impartiality. "I thought that's just how courts worked if you couldn't afford a lawyer," the woman, Kaisha Martin, told Maya over the phone. "I thought I didn't matter enough." Those words haunted Maya. How many people had been denied justice simply because they didn't know the system could be challenged? With Mrs. Henderson's guidance, Maya drafted 2 documents, a formal motion for recusal, citing Crawford's undisclosed conflict of interest and pattern of bias, and a complaint to the State Judicial Ethics Committee. Both were meticulous, professional, and backed by undeniable evidence. The night before the next hearing, Robert found Maya asleep at the kitchen table, surrounded by legal documents. He covered her with a blanket and whispered, "Your mama would be so proud of you." Maya stirred, half awake. "We're gonna win, Dad. Not because we're louder. Because we're right." Part 6. The moment of truth. The courtroom felt different this time. Maya walked in beside her father, carrying a leather folder containing their motion, her heart pounding but her hands steady. She dressed professionally, a simple black blazer and slacks, and she'd rehearsed every word she needed to say. Mrs. Henderson sat in the gallery, present but silent, offering moral support. Gregory Walsh noticed immediately. He leaned toward his assistant, whispering something that made them both glance at Maya with new attention. Judge Crawford entered, and the bailiff called the court to order. "We're here for continuance on Johnson versus Riverside," Crawford said, settling into his chair. "Mr. Johnson, are you prepared to proceed?" "Your Honor," Maya stood, her voice clear. "Before we proceed, the plaintiff wishes to file a motion for recusal." The courtroom went silent. Walsh's head snapped up. Crawford's expression darkened. "Excuse me?" His tone was ice. A motion for recusal. Your Honor, based on undisclosed conflicts of interest and demonstrated bias. Maya approached the bench with copies of the motion, handing one to the bailiff for Crawford and one to Walsh. The plaintiff respectfully requests that you recuse yourself from this case and that it be reassigned to another judge. Crawford's face flushed red. Young lady, I warned you about your role in this courtroom. I'm exercising my father's right to challenge judicial impartiality under State Judicial Code Section 14.3. Maya said calmly. The motion details your family's financial connection to Meridian Holdings, Riverside's parent company, through your son-in-law's position on their board of directors. It also documents a pattern of adverse rulings against self-represented minority plaintiffs in cases involving corporate defendants. Crawford stared at her, and for the first time, Maya saw something flicker in his eyes' fear. This is absurd, Walsh interjected, standing. Your Honor, this is clearly a delay tactic. The motion includes supporting affidavits and case citations. Maya continued, keeping her eyes on Crawford. It also notes that failure to disclose this conflict violates judicial ethics guidelines. A copy has been filed with the Judicial Ethics Committee as of yesterday. Crawford's hand tightened on his gavel. You're making a serious accusation. I'm citing facts, Your Honor. Facts that are public record. My father has the right to an impartial judge. The law guarantees it. The silence stretched. Maya could hear her own heartbeat, feel her father's tension beside her. Finally, Crawford spoke, his voice tight. This court will recess for 30 minutes while I review this motion. He stood abruptly and disappeared into his chambers, leaving a stunned courtroom behind. Part 7. When the scales tip, the 30 minutes felt like hours. Maya and Robert sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, neither speaking. Mrs. Henderson joined them, squeezing Maya's shoulder. You did everything right, she whispered. Now we wait. When they were finally called back in, the atmosphere had shifted. Judge Crawford sat at the bench, his expression carefully controlled but his posture rigid. In the gallery, Maya noticed someone knew, a woman in a gray suit with a courthouse credential badge. An observer from the administrative office. After reviewing the motion, Crawford began, his voice measured. I find that while the plaintiff's concerns are noted, there is insufficient evidence of actual bias. The connection to Meridian Holdings is attenuated at best. Your Honor, Maya interrupted, standing. She'd expected this. With respect, the Judicial Code doesn't require proof of actual bias. It requires the appearance of impropriety to be avoided. The question isn't whether you've been biased, but whether a reasonable person might question your impartiality. Your son-in-law serves on the board of the company suing my father. That's not attenuated, it's direct. Crawford's jaw tightened. Young lady, additionally, Maya continued, her voice steady, I have affidavits from 2 other plaintiffs and a former court stenographer describing similar patterns in your courtroom. The Judicial Ethics Committee is reviewing those as well. You can't deny this motion, Your Honor, but it won't change what they're investigating. The woman in the gray suit wrote something in her notebook. Crawford noticed. The power dynamic had shifted, and everyone in the room could feel it. Walsh stood. Your Honor, if I may, perhaps in the interest of avoiding any appearance of impropriety, even if unfounded, it would be prudent to. I don't need counsel's advice on judicial ethics, Crawford snapped. But his shoulders sagged slightly. He looked at Maya, and this time, there was no contempt in his eyes, only resignation. I will grant the motion for recusal, he said finally. This case will be reassigned to Judge Margaret Reeves. All previous rulings remain in effect, unless the new judge determines otherwise upon review. This court is adjourned. He stood and left quickly, not looking back. Maya felt her father's hand on her shoulder, shaking. When she turned, there were tears in his eyes. You did it, baby girl, he he whispered. You actually did it. But Maya knew this was only half the victory. They still had to win the case itself. Part 8. The Scales of Justice. 6 weeks later, Maya and Robert returned to the same courthouse, different courtroom. Judge Margaret Reeves was younger than Crawford, a black woman in her mid-40s with intelligent eyes and a reputation for fairness. From the moment she took the bench, the difference was tangible. Mr. Johnson, she said warmly, I've reviewed your case file, including the evidence that was previously excluded. I've also noted some procedural irregularities that concern me. We're going to start fresh. Tell me your story. And Robert did. With Maya's quiet guidance, he explained his 22 years of service, the safety violations he'd reported, the retaliation that followed. Judge Reeves listened, asked thoughtful questions, and admitted every piece of evidence Robert had tried to present before. When Walsh tried to object using the same tactics that had worked with Crawford, Judge Reeves shut him down. Counsel, this evidence is properly authenticated and directly relevant. Objection overruled. The hearing lasted 3 hours. By the end, Walsh's confidence had crumbled. The emails Robert had tried to introduce proved that management had pressured him to overlook safety violations and, when he refused, had fabricated reasons to terminate him. The toolbox theft was exposed as the gift it was. Company records showed the purchase order with Robert's name. Judge Reeves took only 2 days to issue her ruling. She found in Robert's favor, ordering Riverside to restore his pension, pay back wages, and issue a formal apology. More than that, she noted the company's retaliatory practices in her written opinion, language that opened the door for other workers to come forward. Outside the courthouse, Robert hugged his daughter so tight she could barely breathe. Your mama would be so proud, he said again, but this time he was smiling through tears. I'm proud of you, Dad, Maya replied. You never gave up. You taught me that standing up for what's right isn't easy, but it's always worth it. That evening, Mrs. Henderson called. The Judicial Ethics Committee had opened a formal investigation into Judge Crawford. While it would take time, there was momentum. Now other plaintiffs coming forward, patterns being examined. Accountability on the horizon. Maya sat on her apartment balcony watching the sunset, exhausted but at peace. She thought about all the people who'd faced Crawford's courtroom and walked away believing they didn't matter. She thought about her father's dignity, restored. And she thought about the law not as an abstract concept, but as a tool that, in the right hands, could change lives. Her phone buzzed with an email. It was from a local legal aid organization, offering her an internship. We heard about your work on the Johnson case, the director had written. We could use someone with your courage and dedication. Maya smiled. This was just the beginning. Justice, she'd learned, wasn't something handed down from on high. It was something ordinary people fought for, document by document, truth by truth, until the system had no choice but to listen. Her father had taught her to stand tall. The law had taught her how to fight. And together, they'd proven that even against power and prejudice, truth could win, if you were brave enough to speak it. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.